Welcome back in live to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Today we got our 2022 NFL Draft Edge rankings, one of the more talented positions in the draft. Again, early rankings as we're kind of getting through film on different prospects. We have them listed out on the board, and we're just going to give you guys our thoughts and ideas on every single one of these guys that we have listed. Obviously, more videos to come with deeper position groups too. Starting us off, Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you to start us. Aiden Hutchinson, is your edge one?
Oh, I think he has to be. I mean, just put together a historic season. And I think his play along with his intangibles, I think that's a guy you want on your team. I think that what he did for Michigan is no player who mattered more to their team than he did, I think.
I agree with that, and that's something that just kind of is the icing on the cake for him as a prospect.
Yeah, exactly.
But, digging into this guy's tape, he's a freak. What he did against Ohio State, I think he recorded 16 pressures against two tackles who are going to be playing on Sundays in the future. And even when they moved Terry Munford, he planted him. The combination of his get off for being 265 and his strength, and then he's just got phenomenal bender on the edge. I mean, he can beat guys a multitude of ways. He's really clean with his technique. You can see how coming back for that fourth year just exploded his draft stock. He really got in touch with that technique, and he's an excellent pass rusher.
I mean, he can win every way. He can win with pure speed. He can win with power. He uses his length incredibly, and
his hands are disgusting
edge blocks
too.
with that. So it's exactly. Yep. He just does everything well.
And then in the run game, that's what I want to touch about. That's so when we get into some of these other guys, it's one of their weaker points. It's like a Nick Bonito. He'd be on this list if he just wasn't so weak in the run game. Aiden Hutchinson stands tackles up. He keeps that edge and it makes tackles behind the line of scrimmage. I think he had 15 plus tackles for a loss to go with 14 sacks on the year. And that's also getting chipped a lot, getting tight ends and running backs helping out. He just was doing it all every year. He's the best player in college football. It's as simple as that.
Agreed.
And Bryce Young, you could argue, is the only other one. He's not draft eligible. It's not really that close in my opinion. Let's move on to our prospect number 2. Dill, Kayvon Thibodeaux is also your number 2 edge prospect, correct?
Yep, I agree. I agree with your top 2, and I think that's pretty much consensus. I don't think a lot of people would quibble.
Yep.
And I think with Kayvon, you saw great progression from what he was as a freshman. You saw the talent. He filled his frame out.
It's big, yeah.
Speed didn't speed and athleticism didn't decline at all, and obviously has played really well every year. And just I think what separates him is consistency. I think with Hutch, it was dominated every game, every snap. I think him coming back really helped him, and you see the flashes of Kayvon being incredible, just like you see him with Hutchinson. I just think you see Hutchinson do it more as a senior.
I think that's exactly kind of what I saw watching him on the film. Kayvon Thibodeaux against Utah was pretty dominant, as much as Utah won that game. He wreaks havoc. He can win inside too, uses his length really well. And what you said, I think, sums it up. Kayvon Thibodeaux obviously has had some injury problems, and it's not even like he just didn't play that good. Aiden Hutchinson, while Kayvon Thibodeaux was out, just kind of took over that number 1 overall prospect.
Yeah.
KT is still a phenomenal prospect and potentially a higher ceiling than Aiden Hutchinson. But what you've seen with Aiden Hutchinson putting it together on a consistent basis, every single game he brought it. It just, in my mind, he's the clear. I think he's ahead. It's not head and shoulders, but
because it's like if somebody drafted Kayvon number 1, I wouldn't.
I wouldn't. Yeah, me neither.
So stupid. I'd totally get it. I mean, because you're really splitting. I think you are splitting hairs with these two. I mean, I've loved Kayvon since he was a freshman, and you can see what he has. He's got the potential to be all pro.
And so we talked about it's pretty much like edge 1, 1A, 1B, really close. That third overall guy, George Karlaftis, I think is definitely a tier lower.
I also strongly disagree with Karlaftis over Jermaine Johnson. That's the one point of contention I know we have. I think Jermaine Johnson is an incredible player, and I think they both play a similar game, right? More of a power game as opposed to the speed. Not that the problem is Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon both do both, so they both have
that's how they win. That's how you
power
win
and
as an
speed.
elite edge rusher.
And I think Jermaine and Karlaftis both are not elite, bendy, Von Miller type guys, but they do have elite power. So
George Karlaftis is one of
I'm interested to hear what your opinion is on why you have Karlaftis higher, because you have Jermaine Johnson, who's more productive.
Yeah.
I think more consistent in my mind. I'm wondering what you see in Karlaftis.
Yeah, from what I saw is like he is extremely violent hands and he's extremely powerful, but he also has like a phenomenal get off. He was extremely good in the Notre Dame game. Obviously, Notre Dame had some banged up offensive linemen, but I think the combination of that and they did a lot of putting him inside, and he's very good at doing that as well. Very good in the run game, holding that edge. I want to get into more film with Jermaine Johnson. I did a lot of watching George Karlaftis this morning and last night, and might be just a little recency bias. But George Karlaftis, man, he just goes right through tackles. He just puts the tackle right in the back, right in the lap of the quarterback. And the problem I have with George Karlaftis, here's some of the knocks I see of him as an edge prospect. He's not very bendy. And so you see Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeaux win, get into the outside, bending around, and get to the quarterback. George Karlaftis is not more flexible than those guys. He's not as strong in those flexible positions. He really only wins kind of right through tackles, and he wins a lot there. He's extremely good at it, but that ceiling is kind of capped because if you're only relying on winning through guys, it's easy for them to expect that and get a strong base.
For Karlaftis, are you like somewhat concerned about production? I mean, not a huge year out of him this year. Stats wise, I think he had 4.5 sacks, which really is, God, I think you want to see more now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if his pressures are a lot higher, and that's. I
mean, he was playing for Purdue. You give him okay, when the talent around you isn't nearly as good as the teams you play, it makes sense to have fewer sacks. Of course,
it speaks to how he wins, in my opinion. He wins through tackles, and which is he blows up pockets, but he's not necessarily sacking quarterbacks. Like when you're going right through a tackle, he'll put that tackle right in the back of the quarterback, collapse that pocket, and then other guys are benefiting from that. He would be a good fit in like what the Buffalo Bills like to do. They like those heavier handed, bigger body edge defenders. Like a Mario Addison, it could be a good comp. They don't necessarily win with the speed. They don't win with the bend. They win right through guys, and they're really good in the run game. And that's kind of what I see George Karlaftis. He's just elite at doing that. And the reason he's kind of fallen behind is because he doesn't have that top end bend and speed that
it's fair, because it's just as disruptive to drive tackles into quarterbacks. Like they can't. I do agree. That is I mean, just for me, what I see in Jermaine Johnson is a similar play style, way more production in the run game. He's dominant, and I part of me, I don't think Karlaftis, sometimes in the run, I don't see him being as relentless in terms of how he wants to play it. I think he kind of plays a little nonchalant in the run.
He doesn't chase. You know what he doesn't do? He doesn't chase those balls, those backs down from the backside. Like Aiden Hutchinson,
Aiden's like that. I think Jermaine, he plays with a high motor. I think what he did against Notre Dame in the run, very impressive.
Jermaine Johnson's film against Notre Dame is disgusting.
That he dominated Zion Nelson. Grant, I don't think Zion had but just in terms of how he used his length on Zion and had him pretty much on skates all game. I think that's for me kind of what I see in Jermaine Johnson. I think you see moments where I think he shows to be a more dominant player than Karlaftis.
Yeah, one of the things you want to look for is like the two-dimensional ways to win. Like, can you win a plethora of ways? Because when you're like a George Karlaftis and you don't have that many ways you win, it's a little bit easier for those tackles to kind of know what's coming and address it and stop it. Guys like Kayvon, Aiden Hutchinson, even Jermaine Johnson can win in a multitude of ways. So I haven't gotten as much film as Jermaine Johnson as I need to. So I will get back to it. And as when we get back into this edge class, we can have another conversation about it and maybe bump him up because I'm not like in love with George Karlaftis.
Yeah, it's fair. I think it's kind of how I feel. I'm not in love with either of them, honestly. But
I'm in love with the first two, though.
Well, yeah, and I don't mean not in love, but I think they're both good prospects for sure. Like first round talents. I just don't see him as like generational players. Like
Jermaine Johnson's getting slept on by the draft community. I see him like getting mocked into the second round. Like I don't think this dude's falling out of the top 30. All right, let's get to two more wild card prospects. Let's talk about David Ojabo. He's a third-year guy out of Michigan. He barely played his first 2 years on the team. As Michigan fans, as Dale and I are, we're hearing rumblings of this dude, but we haven't really seen him. He's a freak athlete. He's very long. He runs a blazing 40. He's very fast and explosive, and that all came together this year. Dale, what's it? 12 sacks on the year for David?
Yeah, I think it was
12 sacks on the year for David Ojabo. Yeah, give me his numbers. He's massively
productive. 11 sacks.
11 sacks on the year.
Fumbles. That's a big number.
So, like, this cat, like, he benefited a lot from Aiden Hutchinson. 100%. Aiden Hutchinson was getting all the help. Aiden Hutchinson was the one blowing up the pocket a lot, and David Ojabo was kind of the benefitor of some of those. And that's not a knock on this dude. He is. I saw somebody tweet that David Ojabo could be picked first as an edge defender based on just projection of his talent. I think that's utterly ridiculous because Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeaux are so good.
In this class, I think that's a little crazy.
But David Ojabo has some incredible tools. He's very, very long. He's very explosive. He uses his hands well. He's still developing that, and you see that. This is a dude who didn't start playing football until he was a junior in high school. He came over here from Scotland to play basketball. And so he's definitely more of a project. The reason I have him a little bit lower is because he does not, for one, project oriented, as I kind of just mentioned, and two, he's only put it together for 1 year. So we've only seen him for 1 year. Three, he's not very good in the run game. And that's the reason why he wasn't even starting the first couple of games for Michigan, is because he's not very good at holding that edge. He gets moved around a lot by good athletic tackles and strong tackles. He just needs to put on some sand, as you might say.
And they don't in Michigan, even a lot of even down the stretch wasn't playing him a ton on early down.
Against Georgia, he didn't play. Didn't play much.
Okay, Michigan's coaches know as well as anybody, and it could be just not having a great feel for what his assignments are and what his job is on every play. I don't know why exactly Michigan didn't play him as much in the run, besides the obvious things.
It's because he just gets moved.
The obvious things you know, but it's there might even be. So they know essentially better than anyone that the run game was an issue, and obviously not even. I think you saw some progress, but there's probably still some wood to chop. But the progress that was there in the run game, especially, does make you think that potential can translate more than some prospects. Maybe the guy we're going to look at next, saw somewhat less progress being made.
I'm lower on David Ojabo then draft community has him as a top 15 pick. I have him more towards the back end of the first, early second. You said it. There's a lot of wood to chop. The thing is, the log is big. There's a lot of wood that you can chop to get to his peak, and he could be a really special guy. It's a little far off that I'm not willing to use a top 15 pick on a guy.
Yeah, the only thing I did, the slight pushback I'll give to you is I think you see progress being made quite quickly in his game. Massive transformation from last year to this year.
We just didn't see him throughout
this year. You saw the run game play get better and better, I think.
And why do you think they didn't play him a lot against Georgia?
I was a little surprised because he did play like the whole game against Ohio State.
But that doesn't
Fair
play
amount
against
of it.
Georgia because he's Jalen Harrell was just a better.
Not to say
runner.
like he was killing it, but I do think like he did start making like a couple plays against Ohio State in the run. I thought were very good plays.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do think the progress he's making is real. Like he is doing it at a high rate. I would say.
So then we'll talk to Drake Jackson, who is a lot of people are high on. I think he's relatively evenly. He started the season as like a top 15 pick, and this guy has, again, a very special physical tool set. As a true freshman, I saw him. He's a 250-pound kid doing backhand springs. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a freak. And then it didn't translate. He had 5.5 sacks his true freshman year. He got banged up last year, and then he only had 5 sacks this year. It's like he's had, I think, 13 career sacks through 3 seasons. Like it's just that's how much David Ojabo had in 1 year. And so I'm not going to pick a guy in the first round, Drake Jackson, who just hasn't put it together yet. And he's had time to put it together. He played a lot as a true freshman. I believe he was banged up in, last year, but he didn't really put it together this year. So I am a little down on Drake Jackson. I think he'll test very well, and I think a team that he could be like on go to like the Bucks, a team that's like we have a very very well-rounded roster. We don't need this kid to come in and rely on him. And they took Joe Tryon kind of like in a similar way. Oh, he's worked out pretty well for them, but it's like we're not going to need to come in and play this kid immediately. We can get him under our wing, get him stronger, get him faster, and I think it's more of a technique thing.
That's my problem. Is like the way he wins is speed, pretty much exclusively.
He doesn't do anything with his hands. He I feel like he rushes the passer with no plan. Like I'm just gonna like see what happens, and it's like can't do that. It doesn't matter how physically kitted you are.
But I mean, like in college, he's athletic enough to be somewhat disruptive because he is a freak athlete.
He was decently disruptive. But I'm not taking him over some of these other guys who've shown, especially Jermaine Johnson. You're kind of selling me on it because at the end of the day, you got to see these guys take their physical tool sets and use it to be productive on the field. George Karlaftis is another guy who leaves a little bit of meat on the bone with like although he was very disruptive. I kind of stand by that point of he's disruptive, and I don't think that 4.5 sacks does it justice to how good he was. So again, Drake Jackson, there's a lot of meat on the bone there that I wish we got to see more of on the film.
Yeah, my main concern is it just didn't seem like the game progressed a whole lot from freshman.
It didn't at all. It didn't at all.
I mean, you see it in the production, and I think a little bit you see it in the play. So at least like with Ojabo, like there's some things to clean up technique wise, but it's like he's been playing for like 5 years, and I think you did see a lot of progress quickly.
Yes, I agree, and that's why you have him over Drake Jackson. There's a couple other guys that will end up in my mind being over Drake Jackson, and that's a good way to kind of cut this episode out. Is those are some prospects that we've gotten film on. I'm pretty confident that this will be our top 5. We're gonna get some more film. Kingsley Enagbare is a guy that I really want to get to, and I think he could be kind of maybe moving up there. I know a lot of people like him. I haven't liked him from what I've seen, but I haven't really given him a fair shot. Cam Thomas from San Diego State's another guy that is an interesting one. Bijai Sanders as well had a pretty good game against Bama. So we will be back with another episode later. It'll probably be next week, kind of our tier 2, but I don't even know if I want to call it a tier 2 because a lot of those guys.
It's a deep class.
It's a deep class, and it's going to be moving around a lot. Like I think after testing, especially for edge defenders.
Yeah, considering the athleticism is
how's the length look? How's the strength look? How's the speed look? How's the get off look? And so all of that's going to be taken into account. But this is a good start on some early kind of draft season film watching of kind of who we have as our top edge defenders in the class. We will be back next week with more position rankings. We still have to get to, I believe, the tight ends on the offensive side of the ball and the quarterbacks. And then on the defense side of the ball, we're going to get to defensive tackles. So I think we're saving the quarterbacks for last just because it's kind of a meh class, not very exciting. But we'll be back defensive tackles and linebackers next week. as usual, appreciate you guys hanging out with us, and we will be back later with more videos. Peace.